Well, hello, we are live, Multifamily Her. Hello, everybody who's joining us now and watching us a recorded version. Today, it's only myself, Ilona Carletti, and we have a special guest today. You won't be able to see Zoria today. She's away out of the country doing really fun real estate investing things that we'll hear about next week, hopefully. And today, like I said, we have a special guest, Amanda Bolan, and she's a pro multifamily investor out of Saskatchewan. I'm super excited to have Amanda on the show. So let me just bring Amanda here. Hi, Amanda.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So good to have you here. And thanks for agreeing to be a special guest on today's show. You're actually our first guest. We haven't had a guest before. So I'm super excited about this live. And Amanda, did you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Amanda Bolan. We invest in multifamily real estate in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's our local market for now. And we have a young family with 3 little ones. So my husband and I do the business together, and we have a passion for sharing the business and teaching others along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you tell me, so when did you start in real estate and how did you end up doing multifamily investing? Like, why multifamily?
A few years ago, we were kind of pushed over an edge. Where our backs are up against the wall, and we had 2 options, which was like, the defensive mode and just kind of like hunker down. Oil and gas was going through a really tough patch. We had some run-ins with the company, and we decided at that point, you know what? We've been talking about doing real estate. Let's do it. And so we actually started in the flipping space. Kirk and I first came across the idea of multifamily about, I think it was in 16, and we'd seen a video on YouTube, and that had broken down the business aspects of multifamily. And so for us, it was a one-day thing. One day we'll do it. One day when we get to that point where we can start that business, we would love to get into multifamily. So our initial start was in 2018 with some flips. And then about a year later, we realized, why wait? Let's get into what we actually want to do.
Okay, so you've done flips before, and then after flips, you decided to move. Did you do any single family housing, like invested in single family houses?
No, our first rental was in 2020. We closed on our first rental early in 2020, and that was a 12-unit multifamily property.
Okay. Did you say 20 unit?
12.
12
I wish
units.
it was a 20. No, it was a 12 unit, which was well beyond what we had anticipated we would begin with. But as we kept pursuing the business and kept pursuing a property, everything just fell into line as we were open to the possibility of pursuing a good deal.
That's amazing. Like, can you just like walk us through the process, how it happened for you? Like, first of all, how did you even make that jump, mentally in your head, that going from flipping to like multifamily investing?
The beautiful thing for the flipping side was, for my husband and I, is we did a hybrid through the process. So we were hands-on, but we also hired trades to keep the process moving. And the beautiful thing apart, while we were going through that, my husband and I constantly had earbuds in, and we were filling our minds, and we were chatting back and forth what we were learning. And so we were learning all kinds of stuff about business, mindset, real estate. And the really cool thing about that was that it was really giving us this really neat conversation. And I think when you're with your spouse and your partner, and you can, bounce those ideas off each other and start to grow together. And that really helped us grow together. So even though we were doing like some labor intensive work, we were really working on our minds. And
Like,
as we were
you were
going,
listening to like audiobooks, or like, what do you mean by working on your minds? Like, how
yeah,
were
like
you?
audiobooks were heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, like I do a little bit of podcasts. We did some of those, but it was heavy into audiobooks. So we'd be listening to the same book at the same time, and then bouncing off what we were getting for key takeaways. And so during that process, we got to the point where we're like, why can't we pursue multifamily now? Like, why does it have to be some future thing that we do? Why not now?
Yeah. And it's so true that our minds are the ones that are stopping us often, right? It's the thing that stops us. And if you are able to go past those barriers and mental blocks, then you'll blossom and you'll do really well. But it's the hardest thing to do, is that mindset shift and going through those blocks.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask you, for our listeners here, do you have any tips or advice for related to that mindset and mental blocks and taking action? Because like you're like amazing, you just like went from flipping to multifamily investing, first property 12 units. It's incredible.
I think it's one step in front of the other, and a lot of times. And I am a strong believer in you should educate yourself and you should know stuff to move forward. I'm not flippant in saying, just have great mindset and everything will come together. And it's like, I think it's a powerhouse combination of both. And so if you're educating yourself on the business aspect and you're learning the processes and you combine that with mindset, it's two things that come together that just makes this incredible things happen. And so my thing would be, is if you want to head somewhere and if there's something you want to step into, what do you need to know next in order to take the next step forward? And so to say that I had 100% of everything figured out when we were headed in that direction, I don't think is true. However, I feel like we were really intentional about learning as we needed and keep pushing forward and keep learning and keep digesting and leverage other people's knowledge that we came into contact with, that we knew, that we were meeting, to fill in those gaps of the areas that we didn't yet know in terms of multifamily.
Yeah. So you basically, yeah, you and your husband are a power team. And can you talk about, because I think from what I remember, you took possession of your first multifamily property in the midst of a pandemic. Like, how was that experience for you?
Oh man. So we pulled our conditions the first week of March in 2020 before things shut down. I mean, there were some rumblings, there were some things going on, but as a whole, like the world was normal. My kids were still in school. There was no you're going home. And then like the week later, we get this call from the school saying like, come pick up your kids' stuff. They might be coming back. And we're like, why would we be picking stuff up if they're coming back? And it was just this bizarre moment to then like, commercial deals aren't going to be funded. And we had pulled conditions. I mean, we had our funding lined up, but commercial's different. So we took possession April 1st of 2020. The biggest thing going on in the news at that time was that nobody was going to pay rent. And, we were kind of like, we got our first rental. It's a 12 unit. Nobody's going to pay rent. Like, what's going on? And, we were a little bit getting uneasy. It's easy to take in what everybody's saying. But
Yeah, the headlines, the negative headlines sell.
But it's like, what's fact? What has happened?
Yeah.
What is precedent? And so I was like, I remember sitting down with my husband and being like, okay, worst case scenario here. Nobody pays rent in April and May. So it's 2 months, not one tenant pays rent. That's worst case scenario. What are the odds of that happening? Very, very low. If it does happen, chances are it's happening on a global scale. So we're all up a creek together. So, so the way I looked at it was like, it's 2 months of acquisition costs was worst case scenario. And I think that really drove home the point to us to be well capitalized when you're doing any deal and to be in a position to ride out storms. And what that did was it took our like heart rate from like up here and it brought it down. And it was like, let's look at what's happening, what the facts are. Let's see where we can go from here. So April 1st came around, everybody was banging the gongs. And then it was like, April 1st has been here. Now May 1st is the big one, because of course everybody was still working in March, right? And, things wound up working out. We, reached out to tenants to see where everybody was at, how people are doing, is there anything brewing? And for us, fortunately, we had a great, a pretty good stack of tenants. They were quality tenants who were basically typical people like you and I, in the sense of, we're honest and honorable, and things.
You were paying rent.
You're paying rent.
That's awesome.
Yeah, as they weren't impeded from doing so. So I guess for us, the biggest learning curve through all of it is just to throw the what ifs aside, be aware of them, but don't give them too much of our mental energy or give away our peace to the things that might be that haven't actually happened.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. We often or sometimes just like get thrown into the loop and keep going, spiraling down. It's a dangerous loop. So yeah, pulling yourself out of it and logically approaching the situation is so helpful, like what you and Kirk did. So yeah. And can you tell me, like, can you talk a little bit about how you and your husband, how this dynamic works, that you work together in real estate? Like, do you deal with different aspects of your business? Like, did you divide it like that, or
We're
not?
Yeah, we're pretty fluid. So I wouldn't say that we have specific defined roles. And I feel like we work really well with ebbs and flows. And so my husband, we've had a small business for a while. He's very much active in that as well. So it's like if he's really bogged down and busy in that aspect, then that's where I come in and step in and take up a little more, or vice versa, if I've got something going on or whichever. So we haven't, we aren't the type that are saying like this, and this is for me, and this is for you. However, it's like we do play to our strong suits in terms of what we do. And so, like, I heavily enjoy the acquisition part and going after the deal and due diligence stuff. But then he's also coming around being that second set of eyes. We have conversations routinely. I'm pretty sure I bored him to tears often. I shouldn't say that. It doesn't bore him. But at the same time, it's just we have a really good dynamic. So, where some relationships require that, like I need to know exactly what each of us are doing here. We found a really good balance where we just kind of like ebb and flow with each other based on what's going on in our lives and, what the needs of the current situation are.
Yeah. And do you find, like, how do you find your deals, Amanda? Are you going for off-market deals most of the time, or do you find them some other way?
I'll take them any way they come.
Yeah.
The first deal was off market. It was a private sale. I really appreciated that process. I like connecting with people and I like building the relationship and the rapport. And I felt like there was a lot of value in that. Also, I like the fact that you get a lot of the, odds and ends about the property, that an owner is willing to share when they build a relationship with you. We've also been able to maintain that relationship a bit, which is wonderful. Like, I think it's just an immense amount of value out of that alone. And then the other building was a pocket, like it was off market. However, it was through agents, and we did use a broker at the time to go through on that deal. So that's, we're open to either way. If the deal makes sense, whether it's on market or off market, I mean, we'll go after it.
Yeah. And how was the experience of going from, so you went from 0 doors to 12 and then to 24. You basically 10 exit, 24 exit. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
In 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just over. Yeah, it was just, I guess April 1st was the first, April 1st of 2020. And then, yeah, February of 2021, we had the second building. I was a little bit nervous in the sense of being like, okay, we went 0 to 12, 12 to 24. How that would all go, it's that process of growing in the unknowns and that we talk about. So it's like not giving a lot of stock to those feelings of uncomfortability, but being aware that they're there. And so it was definitely interesting, but I think it's like we had tools from our first property that we were able to carry into our second property in the sense of turnover and, inherited tenants and that kind of stuff. And then also knowing the process, when we took our first building, we were like, this is weird. We just picked up all these keys to take to our manager. But at the same time, it felt very weird to have this handful of keys from being never a landlord to a landlord. So I feel like the first building was almost harder than the second, just because there was a ton of like unknowns in the first deal, and especially entering the whole global situation that was going on. So it was like, we have all these keys now, what, we got the operation side. So
yeah. And so you buy, like, tell me a little bit about the product that you buy. You buy older assets and then you renovate them. Is the like forced appreciation, or what's the strategy, Amanda?
Yeah, we'll take any age. I like new. We all do. I'll take something older stock. But I think it's just being aware with older stock. We do value add. So we want to see something with forced appreciation. We want good quality neighborhoods and value add opportunity. Those are two main criteria of what we want to look for. And then from there, it's like, if it's an older asset, we'll just be aware of that in terms of what we set aside for our maintenance budget, what we expect for our renovation budget. and that kind of thing versus a newer product. So we have two very different products. Our one building is, it's 1960-ish. And then the other building is, mixed between 95 and 2006. So it's a much different product in terms of the build type.
Yeah.
And we see key differences. Both have value in them and the type of asset that they are, but they're very different product.
Like in terms of maintenance, do you find any differences there?
Oh, yes. So in the older product, you're definitely going to have a higher maintenance line. But I also think some of that comes down to tenant profile as well. And it also depends on what's needed for your area in terms of renovations. So if you're planning a renovation budget, being very aware that, it doesn't have to look like HGTV to be rentable. You want it clean, you want a quality asset. We believe in offering something slightly better than everyone else. In the sense of it just gives us really easy rent and turnovers where it's just, we can add that little extra that doesn't even cost that much. But it just makes it for a quick turnover or easier to keep and maintain tenants.
Yeah, for sure. Know what everybody else does and do it slightly better.
Yeah.
And I see Cheryl has a question. How did you figure out your reno costs?
I think if you don't have personal experience with renovations, relying on a contractor for that, for us, I'm really good at estimating and budgets. I'm really nerdy when it comes to numbers. And I'm also very good handy wise. So I understand, how long it's going to take to do flooring or, a repaint or different things and odds and ends, countertops, that sort of thing. So if you already have a good idea of renovation costs, if you make yourself like a checklist and then you add in line item by line item what it's going to cost, that would give you a pretty good budget to figure out for your reno cost. If there's major items like a roof or a boiler, common area upgrades, etc., those kinds of things, like get some quotes, ballpark estimates if you can. I would even go as far as paying somebody to quote it, as you're pursuing it, just so that you're valuing their time as well, as part of your due diligence process. So, and then I always say to be very conservative on any renos. When we were flipping, same thing. I always added a contingency line and I pretended that money was spent. So if we did wind up saving it in the end, that's like a bonus profit. But if it gets spent, I expect it to go anyway. So I think it's the same thing in the multifamily and rental space.
Yeah, that's a really good point for sure. Yes, please, to our listeners, we want to hear your questions. So leave them in the chat and I will pop them up here and we'll ask Amanda here while we have her attention on the show here. Amanda, can you talk a little bit about how your kids come into play? What do you teach them about real estate? Do you take them to your properties? How do you integrate kids, family life, and real estate?
So the kids are on a lot. Like they're not always there, but they are often along. We are actually homeschooling this year, so that's a new level of adding in for them being around a lot. Yeah. So they have been to everything from, meetings with the accountant or the lawyers, and they're well behaved. We don't take them all the time, but at the same time, they're learning through osmosis. They're simply there and present in meetings where they're hearing things. Maybe they don't understand it now, but maybe in the future. In terms of like going through the business process, we explain to them, like our tenants are our customers and our clients, and we take care of them. That they are people, like value. So yes, they do pay us this much to stay here. However, this is what we offer in return. So we teach them the business, the economics of it a little bit, as age appropriate. And same thing, they've been along for renovation projects or different odds and ends, helped out with different things in the best way. You
don't get complaints, it's too boring. They're happy to tag along.
The word boring doesn't really fly well in my house, but we'll fix that. I think it's finding balance. We basically tell them this is a family business. This is for you guys in your future. This is for us in our future. So they're pretty understanding of that. I think we're pretty good in terms of rewarding them, like in the sense of being like, thank you for being awesome today. That helped us because of we were able to do X, Y, Z. And so we'll reward them as well, because we don't want this to be something that, down the road, they're bogged down and like, oh, mom and dad and their work. So they definitely come along with us different times. Sometimes they are there, sometimes they aren't. Sometimes we'll have a screen along for something for them to watch a show or something. Other times they'll be put to work. So I think they're at the age yet where like being around mom and dad and participating is still fun. So
Still fun, yeah. How old
we're
are
gonna
they,
relish that.
Amanda?
Yeah.
Sorry, how old are your kids?
Oh, sorry. They are 6, 8, and soon to be 10. She'll be turning 10 here in
Oh,
just a
yeah.
couple weeks. Yeah.
Perfect ages, yeah,
Yeah.
for tagging along and absorbing
Yeah.
all the knowledge that they can from you. This is great.
Yeah.
And I have another question. I see that I don't see any questions in chat, so I'll throw you a bit of an unfair question.
Go ahead.
What's like when you think about multifamily space, what's your favorite and least favorite part about it?
My favorite part is like the acquisition and the new part where you're just taking it over and you're starting to stabilize and it's the initial thrill of like, oh, we got a new asset. You guys are coming up on that right away here. I'm super stoked for you. And
Yeah, thanks.
that's probably like the fun part is just seeing it. It's like your hard work, all your due diligence, your prep work,
Yeah.
coming together. And then now we're here. We actually have the asset, and it's something that we're going to now have for the
And
long
it's a lot of work, right? Like that
it's
acquisition
ton.
process, so
It's a
much of work.
ton. So it's like to have the reward of crossing the finish line, to me, that's like such a thrill. It's like, oh, here we go. So I'm looking forward to that next one. Um, you know, the downside of the part I don't like is like, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but it's the in between of waiting again and trying to
Yeah.
find, and it's all that prep work to go and get one. I think the hardest thing we've had to do so far is walk away from a deal.
Mm,
And because of the time, the finances put into it, things like that, that was probably we've walked away from 2 deals actually. Our very first deal we had under contract, and then our we had one in between the 2 buildings as well. At the time, it wasn't enjoyable to walk away because of like
mhm.
time, money, the whole process like of going through the motions. But at the same time, we're in a position for us that we never want to take on something that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense for what we're looking for. It doesn't align with what we our vision of our portfolio. And the other thing too is we don't want to find ourselves in a place miserable because we bought a deal we shouldn't have bought. So
Exactly.
far we've averted that, but we'll see. So I think that's probably the least favorite part is having to collapse a deal if absolutely necessary. It's not fun.
Oh yeah, yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, I had a bit of an
Try not to.
experience with that as well, and it's
Yes.
emotionally can be quite can bring you down too, especially if you've put so much energy and time into it and really wanted to make it work. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's probably
Yeah.
better to walk away from what
Yeah.
not probably, but it is better to walk away from what doesn't work.
It's true.
Yeah. And I had another question for you, Amanda, is like when you reflect back on your success so far in real estate, what would you say was the most like the factor that propelled you forward the most?
It's going back to the cliche of just taking action and being very aware that a lot of what holds us back is something that isn't real. It's a fear or something that's, tripping us up. That's preventing us from taking the next steps needed to be able to push that next deal across. And I think that's been a big part of our growth the last couple of years, especially, has been being okay with, not necessarily knowing everything, but being okay with stepping forward, putting out our safety parameters, which is our due diligence, right? And our safety nets in place, and then being confident in the systems that we're putting together and walking into them. So I think our biggest part of
Mhm.
success has been, the mindset side, but then putting action behind what we're learning each and every time we learn something new.
Yeah, and I hear from a lot of successful people that that's the key. Like you read a book or you do something and there is one or two lessons and you need to implement them right away so that
Yeah.
they stick. And it's those little actions that make a big difference, right? One after another and after another. Yeah.
It's like you hear people say that if you take like one, you just change your life 1% at a time and just continually that next 1%. So it's just that one little step and that compounds over time. It doesn't have to be huge leaps. It's just like making those little movements.
Yeah. I really like that. It actually resonates a lot. It's how do you achieve your goals? You break them down into smaller steps and you take
Yeah.
one step at a time. So in little It's the same as you eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Haven't tried
Yeah,
that one yet.
yeah. Well, we are at 25 minutes, and Amanda, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing with us your experience in real estate and what you've learned so far and what propelled you forward, and talking about your family as well, because we, as real estate investors, we invest as our whole selves, right? We don't just
Yeah.
bring a portion of ourselves into our business. So it's important to be able to integrate the relationships that we have in our lives and the children and everything, and take those steps forward. So I thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you again on the
Yes.
show one
Thank
day.
you for having me. I appreciate this.
Thank you for listening and watching the show, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.